Good afternoon, Shir. How are you?
Good. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining me live after our first part. This is our second part under the title, the larger title is Israel's Zombie Economy. And the actual episode today is on the counter-revolution of the Israeli arms industry. And we are going to address a number of topics today, and then we will have 3 more episodes. And I understand that you and I had some trouble getting here. I faced trouble coming here from Paris because of demonstrations and strikes. And you had, I understand, some trouble, but we are now in Strasbourg.
Yeah, Strasbourg is the home of the European Court of Human Rights, so it's worth mentioning it here in our conversation because this court has ruled that BDS is a human right under European law and not anti-Semitic.
Wonderful. And this is actually, a very interesting place, but we will get right to it because I could say a lot about my experience here, which has been pretty positive. Shir, we're going to start with the discussion for today, but if you can give us a quick brief of the first part on the war currency, just to bring us up to speed.
Yeah, last time we spoke about these tokens that the Israeli Ministry of Defense is manufacturing in order to pay the reservists and getting them to continue to fight in this ongoing, endless genocide in Gaza, and how this money is actually coming from nowhere. They're printing this money as a competitive, competing currency to the Israeli currency, which is a financial disaster waiting to happen.
All right. Thank you for that. That brings us up to our discussion today, and I want to start with a question about your work. In your work, in your book, actually, about the privatization of Israeli security, you describe how Israel's arms industry started as a national project in state hands and was gradually privatized, which is not something that's unfamiliar to various parts of the developing world. Does this trend continue during the Gaza genocide, or are there other patterns that are taking place?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about my last book, because this is a research project which traced how the Israeli arms industry became more and more privatized and adopted a very neoliberal capitalist kind of logic, manufacturing and selling weapons for profit and not in order to promote national goals. I feel like my book has become severely outdated because now, once Israel embarked on a genocide, the arms industry completely changed course. And instead of acting like companies, according to their financial interests and the interests of the shareholders, they started to act as branches of the Israeli government, as branches of the Israeli state, hand in glove with the Israeli military. And in fact, they are regressing to what they used to be in the 30s, even before the State of Israel was founded, as a kind of arms factory or arms warehouse to arm the Zionist militias, which were ended up committing the Nakba starting from 1948, and now the Israeli military as it commits genocide.
Before we go on, can you tell us a little bit about how you might change things if you are actually updating the book? And I'm assuming that you'll be able to have some sort of an update.
I'm actually writing a new book. The book will be called The Political Economy of the Gaza Genocide. And it will deal exactly with this very dramatic change in Israeli culture, Israeli economy, the very topics that we are talking in this conversation.
Let me ask you something about the military embargo. How did the military embargo against Israel impact the arms industry? And I have some follow-up questions, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that first.
Yeah, I'm not sure that everyone are aware how fast the military embargo against Israel is picking up pace, especially after the genocide has started. The Palestinian civil society has been calling for a military embargo against Israel since the beginning of the BDS movement, but very strongly and clearly since 2011. Amnesty International has already endorsed this call for a military embargo, but most governments in the world, including governments which were, let's say, friendly to the Palestinian cause, have ignored this call and continue to trade weapons with Israel for a lot of reasons. But after October 2023, this has changed. And more countries are canceling arms agreements with Israel. The military embargo has three sides to it, meaning that it's illegal to sell weapons to Israel, of course, because Israel is using them to commit war crimes against humanity. It's illegal to buy weapons from Israel because this finances Israel's war machine. And it's also illegal to transit weapons to Israel through a third state territory, through their ports and airspace and so on. So very few countries in the world have actually made a complete cut and announced that they will respect all the three forms of the military embargo. But almost every country in the world has adopted some part of the military embargo. Even the United States, which is meaning that even the United States understood that there are some weapons that they cannot allow Israel to have. And some deals would end up reflecting badly on the United States and its interest, not just from a moral or legal point of view. And because of this growing military embargo, it became harder and harder for Israel to obtain its weapons. And there is this sort of myth that Israel can get everything it wants by producing it itself or getting it from the United States, but this is not true. Even Germany, which is the second biggest supplier of weapons to Israel, cannot give Israel everything it needs. Modern weapons are extremely sophisticated, extremely complex. You need detonators, you need propellants, you need navigation systems and targeting systems. And for example, the only country in the world that makes the engines that Israel uses for its quadcopters that it is turning into suicide drones is China. And China is not too happy about selling engines that Israel is using to commit genocide with. So you see how this military embargo is picking up pace. And Israel has responded to it on three different levels. Level one is something that I'm afraid I cannot share everything with you because all the information, if I share all the information, it could harm the Palestinian efforts.
And you'd have to kill me.
I would not have to kill you, but I don't want to say anything that would undermine the military embargo campaign that we are supporting. But one thing that Israel did, and this was published on Israeli media in Hebrew, so it's open, is they switched their network of arms dealers that is spread all over the world of retired Israeli officers that have been peddling Israeli weapons and security techniques and mercenaries around the world to various presidential guards in countries, authoritarian states. They activated this network in order to procure through the black market, through side channels, those components that they're not able to get through normal channels. And they're willing to pay a lot more. And so they spread their net far and wide and found customers that normally would never talk to the Israelis, never consider selling to Israel. But for enough money, you can get people to agree to quite a lot, unfortunately. So that's one thing they did. The second thing they did is they selected the right people inside Israel to manage this operation of finding holes in the military embargo and finding ways to get the weapons that they need in order to continue the genocide. And here I want to point out that after the former Israeli commander-in-chief of the military, Herzi Halevi, resigned from his post, so he was pushed to resign after the alleged failure of the Israeli forces on October 7 to defend against the attack. And the government could select a new commander-in-chief to replace him. And they had three candidates. And all the three candidates made it to the shortlist because they were unquestionably loyal to Benjamin Netanyahu personally. So it's really a personal thing. But they did have different qualifications. One of them was very well known for his experience in land warfare, commanding tank brigades. The other one was an expert on the region, on the southern part of Palestine and Gaza. And the third was the one who was actually selected, Eyal Zamir. He was not even a general at the time. He was the executive officer of the Ministry of Defense, and his job was to find holes in the military embargo, to get his hands on the weapons and components that Israel needs things like aluminum powder or fast-burning explosives for detonators. And he was tapped for this role because of his qualification. So that's a coping mechanism. And now Israel has a lot of trouble. The Netanyahu government has a lot of trouble with Eyal Zamir, and there's a big fight, but they did choose him for his ability to find weapons. Now, the third policy that they've used is the financial policy, trying to spend money in order to get the weapons they need. And they did it by adapting the Israeli budget. So the budget, which was postponed by the Israeli government. First, the government has to agree to it, then it passes for the parliament, the Knesset, to vote on it. The budget, they were not able to propose a budget that the Knesset would approve until they had a ceasefire in Gaza. So even though they were supposed to pass the budget in the end of 2024, well into 2025, they still didn't have a budget, and they only passed it. The government only made a proposal for a budget, which was a ceasefire budget, on March 2025, as Israel was breaking the ceasefire. So they got a document and then broke the ceasefire. Just so you understand how difficult it was for them to get the funds and to cut from education, health, and transportation, everything, in order to find money for the military. And even that money was far from sufficient. But they said, well, it's a ceasefire, so we don't need that much. But what they did agree to in this budget is to spend tens of billions of dollars to build supply chains in Israel to make the weapons domestically, which they cannot import from abroad. So this is the big bonanza for the Israeli arms industry, to be able to sell whatever they want, at whatever quantity they want, at whatever price they want, to the Israeli government. And in the budget, it says that they will establish new factories for everything, from bullets to missiles, from tanks to airplanes, and also for materials, which is the moment where I raise my eyebrows, because you cannot manufacture materials. You need to mine materials, and Palestine is not does not have all the materials, all the minerals that are required to make these advanced weapons. So they will have to import them somehow, and you cannot make a factory to manufacture these things. So this is how they try to cope with this crisis. And I just, as a side note, I think it's worth mentioning that Israel has already tried this once. Israel tried it after the War of 67 and the occupation of 67, where France, which was, at the time was the biggest supplier of weapons to Israel, imposed a military embargo on Israel. Israel responded by saying, we will make everything domestically, we don't care. And the weapons that they manufactured between 1967 and 1973 failed in the War of 1973. These weapons were useless against the Soviet weapons that were used by Syria and Egypt. And so Israel was saved, so to speak, by the United States, which supplied it with American weapons. And from that moment on, several generations of Israelis became acutely aware that they cannot manufacture their own weapons. They are completely dependent on importing them. And it seems that now the lesson has been forgotten.
I want to ask about Elbit systems, which we've also heard about this from various forms of action, actually, against its affiliates or supply chain sort of routes and paths, not least in parts of Europe. Is it true that they actually boasted that, or Israel boasted that the war is leading to record profits via Elbit systems? And does this confirm or mean that Israel's arms industry and various other countries that are connected to it are actually profiting from genocide?
Elbit Systems is Israel's largest arms company. It's a privately owned company, which means it has to publish financial reports, and it is answerable to its shareholders. And it has not been functioning very much like a private company. Also, the second biggest arms company in Israel, it's called IAI, which is a state-owned company, is also manufacturing a lot of weapons for the Israeli military. And also, because it's not a private company, they don't have to publish their financial reports every year. But they're saying the same thing as Elbit Systems, which is the war is great for us. It's a very macabre thing to say when people are being killed every day, and they are very happy about their profits. But I think that we have to kind of deconstruct their argument and see what it is based upon. If you look at those reports that these companies are publishing, and I've also attended the Elbit Systems shareholder meeting in March, which, by the way, was March 18th, the very day in which Israel violated the ceasefire. Again, Elbit Systems probably knew exactly when Israel is going to violate the ceasefire and set their shareholder meeting in order to avoid the criticism of what it would mean for the company that Israel is becoming a pariah state that is breaking international agreements and murdering civilians, which would, of course, increase the impact of the military embargo. So they are saying that their profits are increasing, but not really. Their profits are increasing because they are having a backlog of orders that they're not able to fulfill, and these backlogs are measured in the billions of dollars. Their customers abroad have to wait. They're not getting their products because the first priority is to send everything to the Israeli military. And so, as customers abroad are contemplating whether they want to keep those contracts and renew them when they're not getting their products on time, and when Elbit Systems is facing increasing action pressure, like from grassroots organizations, as you mentioned, but also legal pressure, and also they are having serious manufacturing problems because they cannot manufacture enough weapons for the genocide. Then all of these customers may actually decide to give up on their backlog of orders, may decide to, and therefore I don't believe the Israeli arms companies when they say the war is great for us. I think that they are trying to say it in order to attract investors to buy their shares and to buy their bonds, because that's the only way that they can continue to function. And facing a growing divestment campaign against those arms companies, they really have no alternative. So they have to draw a picture. But I think savvy investors will realize that these companies are a very bad investment. So and once they realize that it's not just a moral reason not to invest in these companies, but also a financial reason, then those companies will not be able to sustain themselves.
I mean, I have a few things to share. I might leave some of the details to the end, but as we see the arms embargo on Israel grow, the military embargo, how is Israel dealing with it? What is it doing to deal with this? Are there specific policies? How are they circumventing this?
It's good to just pause on the distinction between an arms embargo and a military embargo, as you've used both terms, because an arms embargo is really just about the weapons, but a military embargo is wider and is also about military cooperation. You have universities around the world, but especially in North America and in Europe, that have joint research projects with Israeli universities to develop weapons and military technology. So this is not an exchange of arms, but it is absolutely part of what a military embargo needs to encompass. So just a side note here. But going back to your question, how do the Israelis or the Israeli government deal with the military embargo? In fact, you have two schools of thought. The school of thought of the Israeli opposition, I think we'll talk more about them in our next segment, is that Israel needs to work with allies, work with the European Union in order to improve relations to the point where the military embargo will be eased and where they will be able to resume trading so that they can get the weapons that they need to kill Palestinians. And they have this delusional idea that if they are nice enough, or if they speak a liberal language enough, then the military embargo will be suddenly lifted, and forgetting that there are legal grounds for this military embargo, and you cannot just smile it away. This is the opposition position. The Israeli government will not have any of it. The Israeli government says, we will not compromise even our language or our attitude. We will continue to call the Europeans anti-Semites. We will continue to mock the United Nations and shred the Charter of the United Nations on the podium. We will continue to act with impunity. And so what is the military embargo really? We will ignore it. We will just go around it. We'll just make our own weapons. And this is equally delusional. It's equally delusional because Israel cannot sustain itself. It's an outpost of European colonialism in the Middle East. It has always been an outpost. And now, more than ever, it has made itself very unwelcome in the Middle East with its policies of genocide, and by attacking 6 different sovereign countries without cause. This is something that will always have consequences, and without the support of the complicit West, Israel is not going to find a way out of the military embargo.
Good. Let me go to Netanyahu's interesting speeches. The first one on September 15th, where he made his infamous Sparta speech. Are the trends you are describing manifested, and how are they manifested in this speech, and also in his UN address on September 26, which is an interesting date, but I cannot reveal in public why it's interesting. But I'm going to keep remembering it every year that this was his UN speech.
Yeah. So in these 2 speeches, Netanyahu told a narrative that Israel stands alone against the whole world. And I think the UN speech, which is very difficult to read. I completely understand that the diplomats, more than 100 diplomats that left the room, it's not just as an act of protest, but also how can you listen to this fascist, racist drivel, which is so full of lies that it challenges your very intelligence to listen to this. But he wasn't speaking to them. He was speaking to his own people, and this is the point. As he did in his Sparta speech, which was 11 days before, which was held in Hebrew anyway, and was obviously addressed to the Israeli public. I think what many people don't realize is that the word Sparta, ancient Greek Sparta, is not something that in Israel is understood in the same way that most people heard about ancient Sparta in school or in Hollywood movies or so on. In Israel, it's part of the school curriculum for the primary school for the 6th grade. And I remember it very well when I went to school, learning about the Peloponnese Wars as an analogy for the Second World War. And it wasn't really history. It was really mythology and propaganda. Sparta was presented as the bad guys. Sparta is a state or a city-state in which babies who have deformities or illnesses are killed, infanticide, and which the men serve lifelong military service. It was described as a fascist state. And fighting a war against Athens, which was presented as this democracy. Of course, today we would use different words, but Athens was considered an open and progressive society, but also colonialist. Athens was also expansionist and kept conquering new territory. And Athens had a weaker army than Sparta, but still won the war because it had a lot of allies. So in this case, when Netanyahu is saying, we are Sparta, he is saying Israel is a fascist state, isolated, devoid of friends, but we will live on our swords and have the entire population in uniform, holding weapons, fighting this endless war. And this is what I offer you. And of course, no one will vote for a politician who says, what I offer you is blood, sweat, and tears like this, with no hope of victory, right? It's really, but nobody will also dare oppose him. What he's actually selling to the Israeli public, also on his UN speech, is despair. The only country in the UN speech that Netanyahu did not disparage was the United States. And he kept praising Trump and praising the United States. But this was also not a message to the United States. I don't think Trump needs Netanyahu's compliments at the UN. He gets enough of them anyway. It was Netanyahu who needed to convince his own public that he's not their friend, but he has the United States behind him. And let's not forget that Netanyahu, who likes to compare himself to Churchill and often boasts how much he read Churchill's autobiography, also read Machiavelli the Prince, where it says that it is better to be feared than it is to be loved.
Thanks, Shir. This is quite a bit, all packed very nicely. I want to bring up the current moment, especially this idea that we are now witnessing a number of Western nations who have recognized Palestine, however superficial this is in light of the actual tangible horror that Israel is visiting upon Gaza and the West Bank, actually, which people do not talk about sufficiently. I wanted to ask about those countries that have done that, irrespective of their motive, irrespective of the fact that they would like to have done that in the retrospect. What are they doing in terms of their actual coordination, collaboration, partnerships, alliances with Israel regarding the arms industry? Has the needle moved at all since the beginning of the genocide in terms of these countries? And I know that some countries like Spain have acted more than others, but in terms of the countries that actually matter in terms of the volume of cooperation, has anything changed?
So your question is, first of all, a question that needs to be presented to a Palestinian. I cannot say if state recognition of Palestine is important or not, because I'm not a Palestinian. But I can say as an activist, and especially in the course of my work for the military embargo, that if I had a conversation with activists, but also with governments, with leaders of governments, about their obligation to respect international law, and we had a path to go, the state recognition of Palestine made the path longer. It was used as an extra obstacle, where I would say, not just me, but of course the movement, the BDS movement, we would say you have to obey the law and stop trading weapons with Israel. And they would say, oh, but first we're going to recognize Palestine. It's a delaying tactic, right, to get more time, because they really, really wanted those weapons. At some point, they started to understand, and it takes very long. I guess I've overestimated the intelligence of ministers of defense and their short-sightedness. I've underestimated how short-sighted they could be. But eventually, even they understand that signing an arms deal with a country that is in freefall, with an arms industry that is facing arrests abroad, which is being banned from one arms fair after the other, is just a very bad idea. And now you mentioned Spain. You mentioned Spain, and I'm thinking that Spain's military has become more vulnerable because it has all of those Israeli weapons and components which are useless and they cannot be maintained. And the Israelis, of course, know all of the back doors and all of the codes to dismantle them. And I'm sure that the Israelis are not keeping those very secret because they don't like Spain now. So it's really a very bad idea to trade weapons with Israel. And Spain, I don't want Spain to have an army. I don't want them to have a strong army. But I expect that they're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money to rebuild their military strength because of the harm that was done to their military strength by trading with Israel. Countries like Germany, which are far more embedded into this very bad relationship with the Israeli military, will have to spend much more time and much more money. And I'm sure that Vladimir Putin in Russia is very happy that so many weapons from Israel are used by the German army, because those are the weak points in the German army that will make it easier for him to intimidate Germany. So the needle is moving, because we are no longer on the stage where only people who care about morality say don't trade weapons with Israel. And we're no longer at the level in which only people who care about the legal aspect say don't trade weapons with Israel. We are already at the third stage, in which the generals themselves, people who have nothing to do with morality and legal arguments, are saying, why should we buy those weapons? And I think then this is where the needle really moves. And I don't know how to get this point across in the most clear way, because the best way that I can see how the needle moves is by following the Israeli media in Hebrew. And every day, newspapers are putting on their front page, the military embargo is affecting us. The soldiers are reporting the weapons are not working. Ammunition stores are starting to run out. What happens if the government decides now to attack another capital of some country in the region, and we'll have to arm the planes with missiles we don't have anymore? And every time the U.S. is saying, well, for the continuation of the military financing agreement with Israel, we need to negotiate, the Israelis are panicking. And it has to be negotiated, because the current memorandum of understanding, which was signed by Obama in 2016, will run out in 2026. And they have to negotiate now what will happen when it runs out. And what happens if the United States says, you know what, you can have whatever weapons you want, but now you're paying for them. This is already the position of many members of Congress, Senate, and even the administration.
I appreciate your sensitivity to the Palestine recognition question, by the way. But as a human, and as an Arab who's Lebanese, Arab, whatever, who's married to a Palestinian, I'm half Syrian also, and every one of these countries has been bombed by Israel. I feel I can give you permission to actually speak about or analyze the question of recognition. It's a very interesting topic, and we just have to not be absolutely cynical, but also, more importantly, not to be naive in light of historical developments, in light of Oslo, in light of these maneuvers that actually bear no impact on the ground so far. But I see the sequence that you're addressing, and how this can be used as a technical delay tactic, supposedly for the good. We will see what will come of it. And I appreciate everything that you shared. I will leave some of my questions until later. I'll just very quickly ask you for a very short, quick answer regarding the military capacity, since we're talking about the military of Israel today, in light of the discussion and prospects of Israel launching another strike. Is Israel ready to do this militarily, given that there has been some sort of, at least from what I have seen, a way of de-emphasizing how Iran has actually harmed some parts of the Israeli military in the 12-day war. So are we likely to see this, impending attack again soon?
I don't know how to give you a short answer to this, because I think the issue is not what weapons are available and how many. I don't know. This is military secrets. But it is about the question, is Israel able to go through the whole process from conceiving an idea, developing a strategy, and then executing the strategy in order to achieve predetermined goals, which is what every military force needs to do, even if it's the military force of a country like Luxembourg, where we are right now. Which is the smallest army in Europe, I think. We are not in Luxembourg now. No, the military strikes that Israel had against Iran and also against Doha were not successful. This is the point. It was not that Iran weakened Israel's military force by bombing air bases and military bases and so on. It's that from the beginning, Israel was not able to develop a plan that would complete the objectives of the strike without crying for help from the United States to come and intervene in the last minute. And in Doha, the attack was a complete failure because the Mossad refused to cooperate. The Mossad said, we will not give you the intelligence about which building to bomb and what time to bomb it because we don't agree with this attack. So instead, Israel used a different intelligence branch, which is the Shin Bet, which is an internal intelligence unit, and they planned the attack, and so they killed the wrong people. It's not the lack of airplanes; it's the lack of brain power, maybe.
Yeah, I'm also referring to the question of deterrence, considering that this is not going to be a walk in the park, and the imminence of the strike, the next strike, is something that is discussed everywhere, and I'm assuming that it has a lot to do with the window of opportunity that might actually be closing, and at least it's one of the main factors. All right, well, I kept you here for longer than I thought for this episode, but I am glad I did, and I'm glad I asked you the trick question at the end, because I wanted to hear from you at this point, considering we're taping now in October, and a lot of things happen in October. I thank you again, and look forward to seeing you. Any last words before we close?
No, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Take care.